Everybody. I'm Russ Harrison, Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA, and this is our January 20th, 2022 legislative update coming from Washington, D.C. Before we get started, I'll remind you, if you have questions, things I bring up, things that you want me to bring up, put them in your chat box, and we'll rotate back to those at the end of the presentation. It's been a busy couple weeks here in D.C. Doesn't mean we've been getting a lot done, but a lot of stuff has been happening. It looks, however, like Congress is set to start. When you start a new Congress, particularly when you have a new president, you usually start off by trying to do some big, exciting new things. And some of those work and some of them don't. But at some point, you got to transition to just getting the work of governing done. The kind of things you just need to do to keep the government functioning. And there are some indications that Congress is ready to start doing that. So let's get right into it. January 20th is, of course, traditionally Inauguration Day. Not this year, but every 4th years. Since the Constitution was amended to move Inauguration Day from March to January in 1933, starting in 1937, this is traditionally the day we get a new president. Not, as I said, this year, though. The FY 2022 budget, not a lot has happened since we last spoke. Not too surprising. We had the Martin Luther King Day holiday in there. And the Congress has been focused on some other things. However, we have heard on Capitol Hill that legislators are, first of all, starting to put together another CR. You'll recall that the federal budget deadline is now set for February 18th. Nobody thinks Congress is going to get everything done by then. And so they're starting to work on another CR that would extend the deadline into somewhere in March. There's a couple different versions kicking around with different dates, but that's what they're thinking of at the moment. And Congress is now deliberately shifting to what's called a minibus strategy. The omnibus bill is when you take all the appropriations bills and lump them into one big bill. A minibus is when you take a couple of the appropriations bills and put them into one bill. So the idea is, instead of passing a bunch of different appropriations bills, Congress will end up passing 3, 4, maybe some other number of omnibus bills, each one of which contains several of the appropriations bills. It's a good strategy, could work. The problem is, if this drags out to the end of March, which is currently the strategy, that's when Congress is hoping they'll get it done by mid to the end of March, that's halfway through the fiscal year. Once you pass the halfway point of the fiscal year, the logic of doing actual appropriations bills starts to fall apart. If you want to make policy changes through the budget, but you wait until the year is more than half over before you do, the ability of the agencies to do anything with any new money you give them becomes compromised. So the closer we get to the end of March without appropriations bills getting passed, the more pressure will be put on Congress to just do a CR till the end of the year. At which point we lose all of the great budgets, particularly the research budgets that we're seeing so far. The frustrating thing is, you get these windows of opportunity in the political space only occasionally, and they don't stay open forever. Right now, there is pretty good bipartisan support on Capitol Hill and in the White House for dramatically increasing most research budgets. Would love to take advantage of that while we have this moment. If we don't do it this year, there's a reasonably good chance that we won't have this moment next year. So IEEE-USA is working very hard to try to help Congress get these budgets passed. It's tricky to do because the political pressures that are slowing things down are things that we can't do a lot about. But this is our primary objective over the next month, is to help Congress deal with the appropriation bills and start to get them moved forward. Which comes to the other budget bill, the Build Back Better bill. This is the big reconciliation bill that's been hung up for the last 4, 5, 6 months. Democrats on Capitol Hill are now essentially giving up on doing one big bill, and they're deliberately moving to break the big reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better Act, into a series of smaller bills. The idea is some of the more controversial items in the bill will be abandoned, but then they'll try to package other parts of the bill into smaller bills that perhaps appeal to interesting coalitions of legislators. More on that in a second. Right now, the parts of Build Back Better that we are most supportive of, the research provisions, the infrastructure provisions, the energy provisions, are all on the list of things that would be put into these small bills. They're not terribly controversial. They're broadly popular, both parties. And so if they go down this road successfully, it is likely that our provisions will be included. And as I said, we're working with them to help do that. The plan is to get this all done by the end of March. You can immediately see the problem there. This is the same time period they're trying to get the budgets done. And so we have two competing priorities already in Congress. So what's going on here is we're seeing two different theories on how to legislate coming into conflict. For a while, there was a theory that the best way to legislate is to make big bills. And at certain points in American history, that was true. The idea is you take a big bill, you put some controversial stuff in it, but then you put a bunch of stuff that people like in it. And because the stuff that they like is in the bill, people that might not vote for the controversial things will vote for the big bill because of all the nice things in it. This was the theory behind comprehensive immigration reform for the last 20 years. The idea is that pieces of immigration reform are very controversial and very difficult, but if we can find something that everybody likes and take all of those somethings and put them into one bill with the stuff that's harder to get passed, everyone will have a reason for voting for the bill and it'll pass. And Build Back Better was kind of built the same way. Everybody can find something in it they like, so they'll have a reason to vote for it. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for the last 20 years, this big bill theory. The smaller bill theory is if you break a big bill into smaller pieces, you can't get everybody to support it, but you might be able to get enough people to support each little bill that you can get them passed, even if it's not the same people. In other words, you can Build Back Better was not going to get any, or at least not very much, Republican support. In the end, it didn't get any. However, if you break it into pieces, you could create a piece of Build Back Better which does find Republican support. And then you can create another small bill that maybe can get support from different Republicans. And that each one of these small bills, if crafted intelligently, can get enough support to pass, and you don't need it to be the same people. Now, the big problem with doing a smaller bill, a series of smaller bills, is that it takes longer. Passing a piece of legislation, even a relatively small piece of legislation, does in fact take time. And roughly, passing 3 small bills, going through the legislative process, vote in the House, vote in the Senate, conference, vote in the House, vote in the Senate, to the president, it's not quite 3 times as long to do 3 small bills, but it is considerably longer. And so you have to devote more floor time to this strategy than a big bill. But if you can't do the big bill, this is your best chance of passage. So we are cautiously optimistic that sometime this spring, Congress will in fact be able to pass at least some of the really good provisions in Build Back Better. Oops. So for the past several months, I've been drawing attention to efforts on Capitol Hill to regulate big tech. As we mentioned, both parties have problems with big tech companies and some of the things that they're doing. They're not the same problems, and so Congress hasn't been able to do anything about it. But that might be changing. The Senate Judiciary Committee is supposed to act today on S-2992, the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. This is one of Senator Klobuchar's antitrust bills. And it's the most viable by a large margin because it has a really good list of bipartisan co-sponsors. Senator Grassley, Republican from Iowa, is the primary co-sponsor, and he and Senator Klobuchar, senior Democrat from Minnesota, make a very good, very powerful team on this bill. Now, the bill doesn't do a tremendous amount. but what it does, I think, could be quite significant. What the bill says is online platforms cannot treat their products and their apps differently than other people's products and apps. So, for example, Apple can't give Apple products preferential treatment in Apple Marketplace as other products. Google can't give Google Maps preferential access to its platforms over MapQuest and whatever else. Possibly significant. And it's an important application of existing antitrust law to the online world. There's also a user privacy provision in the bill that says companies need permission from their customers before selling personal information to a third party, which is fairly significant if it can pass. President Biden is said to be weighing whether he will support the bill. The theory is that he might endorse the bill in his State of the Union address, which will be March 1st. That would be, of course, a big deal. 2992 does have a House companion that is likely to pass. And so there's a very clear path to passage for this bill. The big tech companies are all upset. There are a number of quirks in the bill that could still hold it up. For example, Toyota.com sells Toyota cars. It does not sell Ford cars. Is that a problem? Well, it's not supposed to be a problem, but if you don't word this correctly, it could be. So there's a lot of those little things that still need to be worked out. But we have bipartisan support for regulation of the big tech companies that has a reasonable chance of passing this year. Many of you have heard the kerfuffle that's going on regarding 5G wireless technology and the airlines. There's certain 5G technology was supposed to come online this week, and it in fact did, that utilizes parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that bump up against parts of the spectrum used by airlines. There was concern that the new 5G systems would cause interference, which would cause certain rather important parts of an airline to malfunction, causing airlines to possibly crash, which of course is quite bad. That does not appear to have happened. I haven't heard of any plane crashes, but there was some disruption in the airline industry as some airlines declined to fly to some airports out of concern for interference, and some overseas airlines stopped flying to the United States for the same reason. It's worth noting that 40 countries have already rolled out this technology without problems, so it's not clear there are interference problems. But this whole kerfuffle demonstrates something to IEEE-USA. First of all, we don't have a position on the conflict itself. We have members that say that there is no problem. We have members that say there could be a problem. We don't take a side on that. What we do take a position on, however, is the fact that the dispute itself demonstrates that the United States government needs a better job for solving these kind of conflicts. As more companies, more products, more industries use the electromagnetic spectrum for whatever it is they're doing, demand for the finite amount of spectrum is going to increase dramatically. And as various uses get closer and get creative in how they use the spectrum, and we cram more uses together, interference is going to be an ongoing problem, and the U.S. government needs a system for adjudicating these disputes in a more timely and sensible way than what we're currently doing. Each one of these disputes can't be a political fight in Congress. Congress really isn't equipped to decide these things. They don't have the expertise. And so IEEE-USA has proposed a series of reforms to the executive branch to give the FCC and some other agencies greater ability to evaluate these disputes in advance, to draw conclusions about whether interference is a real problem, and to do something about it if it is or if it isn't. If interference isn't a problem, we should be able to move forward more effectively and efficiently in the rolling out of new technology. And so we see this crisis as an opportunity for reforming the system the U.S. uses for evaluating new technology in ways that should, we hope, make the system work better. I want to note a rising threat to cryptocurrency, and it's a global threat. This has popped up in a number of places. Just this week, Senate Democrats, there's House Democrats have said the same thing in the past, but a number of powerful Senate Democrats, particularly Senator Warren from Massachusetts, have started looking at cryptocurrency's use of electricity. As we all know, mining cryptocurrency is very energy intensive, and it has fairly significant impacts on the country's energy use. Eric Thieden, who is an official with the EU, came out this week saying explicitly that EU should ban cryptocurrencies because they use so much electricity. China has in fact banned cryptocurrencies for a number of reasons, one of which was the strain that they put on their electrical grid. So a couple things here. First of all, concerns over cryptocurrency up until now have mostly focused on law enforcement and the financial markets. Cryptocurrencies, bitcoins, and whatever have, well, we actually don't know the impact, the long-term impact on financial markets. But we do know, because they're hard to track, they are very good for people who are doing illegal things to make payments and whatever. This is a whole new avenue of attack against cryptocurrency. The fact is, mining for cryptocurrency does in fact use a great deal of energy, less than it used to, but it still uses a lot of it. And for people who are worried about global warming or worried about the stability of electrical grids, this is, something to worry about. And so the pressure on the crypto industry is now coming from a bunch of different places. Several countries have already banned cryptocurrency for this reason and other reasons. But I think we're going to hear more about this as time goes on. Some things going on in the immigration space, although I don't yet know what those things are. First of all, the parliamentarian ruled for a third time that immigration provisions cannot be included in Build Back Better, that they are in fact subject to the filibuster in the Senate, and therefore can't pass. That ruling was not surprising. The parliamentarian, I thought, had made it pretty clear months ago that immigration couldn't be part of Build Back Better. But we now have confirmation of that. I do not know if immigration would be included in one of the smaller Build Back Better bills, although I would probably bet against it. OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy within the White House, is announcing some new immigration policies designed to attract international STEM talent to the United States. There's a closed-door briefing at 6 o'clock this evening that I will be at to learn what the details are, and then the announcement will be tomorrow morning. Bad timing for this update, but turns out the president didn't listen to me or listen to our scheduling needs when they decided when to make the announcement. Additionally, Congresswoman Kay Granger, is announcing a major immigration push later today, probably before the White House announcement. Again, I don't know exactly what that is, but it should impact us. Her people had told us this would probably impact universities and the professional societies. So we look forward to seeing what those are and seeing what the next stage in the immigration debate is. Wanted to take a moment to note two of our allies on Capitol Hill who have announced they are not going to be seeking re-election this November. Congressman Langevin from Rhode Island, who is the chair of the House Cybersecurity Caucus and one of the leading experts on Capitol Hill on cybersecurity issues. He has also hosted an IEEE fellow in the past, which is fantastic. And Jerry McNerney, who is really one of our go-to offices on Capitol Hill, and is chair of the House AI Caucus. He is one of the few legislators on Capitol Hill with a PhD in a STEM field. He has a PhD in mathematics, a very unusual field for a legislator to have. Both of these gentlemen have been providing leadership in the STEM space for years and years and will be remarkably hard to replace, and will both be badly missed next year. A couple other quick things. The National Security Board, the National Science Board at the National Science Foundation is going to release its annual State of U.S. Science and Engineering today. There's a link up there if you're interested in it. This is just sort of a snapshot of the state of the science and engineering professions in the United States. Useful data, lots of good graphs. A lot of people on Capitol Hill refer to it or pay attention to it. We will be looking at it. We already know kind of what's in it, but this is one of those things that it's just a mass of data that allow us to pull out all sorts of information, and so we always love getting it, and that should be coming out today. As I said, today is a very busy day in Washington for us. Additionally, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, that's PCAST, is meeting today and tomorrow. Tomorrow in particular, they'll be looking at energy technology, and so something interesting might come out of that. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to a very interesting article in Spectrum that just came out, The Lies That Powered the Invention of Pong. Pong is roughly 50 years old at the moment, Pong being the first commercially viable video game. Nolan Bushnell and Alan Alcorn were the creators of Pong and went on to create Atari. And it's worth noting their accomplishments as engineers, how they changed the computer industry. Computer gaming has pulled a tremendous number of users and a tremendous amount of money into the computer industry to the benefit of many, many IEEE members. And the article itself is actually quite interesting and kind of the story behind how it was created. Our next update will be February 3rd, which is 2 weeks, so we're already into February next time. We should have a much better understanding of how and if Congress is going to handle the budget, and as well as a better understanding of what the next fights on immigration will look like by then. We have a new system here with live stream, so I don't have to switch my screen, so I'll rotate to the questions in a moment, and we seem to have quite a good number of them, which is great. If you have questions, please enter them in there. But before I do that, I'm Russ Harrison, the Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA. My phone number is 202-530-8326. My email address is r.t.harrison@ieee.org. Feel free to reach out any time if IEEE or IEEE-USA can be of service. And with that, I have a lot of questions about the 5G situation, and I'm sure that some of the individuals asking those questions know a great deal more about it than I do. I can answer questions about the political side of things better than the technical side of things, but we'll jump right into it. Brendan Godfrey, Vice President of Career and Member Services here at IEEE-USA, did note that we do have statements of support for increased DoD research and development, and which is true. The problem is that those haven't translated into actual legislative language yet. And the problem is if Congress does an omnibus bill where they just take the existing text and lump a bunch of it together, once those bills are created, editing them and amending them becomes very difficult. And so our concern is if Congress decides to rush things. Right now, the DoD R&D budgets are not increased very much at all, and in fact, there's some cuts in some versions of the budget, which we don't like. So even though there is pressure to increase the R&D budgets, that doesn't mean it's going to make it in the bill if we run out of time. And so that's our concern on that point at the moment. S2992, Brendan asked what members can do to support it. Well, IEEE-USA doesn't have a position on that bill. We don't have a position statement on antitrust matters in the tech space. So, as your advocate, I cannot tell you to support or oppose the bill because the organization and our volunteer leadership have not taken a position on it. However, if you have an opinion on it or on any other matter, the best thing to do is just to email your legislators. You can go to house.gov, www.house.gov, and senate.gov. There's a very easy system right at the top of each page to link you to your personal legislators. Send them an email. Used to be you wanted to send a handwritten letter, but email's the way to do it now because everything's virtual and it's just easier. And we always encourage IEEE members to get in touch with their elected officials on any issue that they think is important. Now, the question is, what about people I don't vote for? I mean, if we want to reach out to Senator Klobuchar, Senator Grassley to thank them or criticize them for their position, I think politicians always like to hear from people saying they're doing the right thing, so that's fine. But the fact of the matter is, Senator Klobuchar cares what people in Minnesota think. She doesn't really care about everybody else. I mean, she does, but she doesn't. And so the general rule is you want to send messages to people you vote for. You generally shouldn't bother to send them to anyone else. But you got 3 members of Congress who care what you think. Go talk to them. Don Heeries mentions the problem was with Boeing. I've actually heard from a couple different, I've had a number of conversations with IEEE members about this, and it seems that most people have different theories on what's going on behind the scenes. I've heard that Boeing said there might be a problem, that there might be liability issues. I've also heard that the problem was really with the private plane industry, not the commercial plane industry. And like I said, I'm not an expert in this. I rely on IEEE members to give me the technical details. The bottom line is, however, if the 5G creates interference, it could cause certain instruments on planes to fail to work, which could create, could put the planes in jeopardy as they try to land. As I understand it, it's the particular instrument that keeps track of the altitude that a plane is at, which is kind of important when you're going in for a landing. And so if there is interference, that's a big deal. But it's not clear there's actual interference. And our concern is that questions like this need to be solved in a technical forum based on the technical realities confronting the industry and the devices in question, not on Capitol Hill. Because Congress really doesn't have the tools to evaluate these things. And we really don't want these things being decided in a political context. They really need to be decided in a technical context. Brendan asks, why are the 2 representatives retiring? I think in both cases, they want to spend more time with their families. We can speculate on why they're retiring. There's no reason, really. Both of them stood a fairly good chance of getting reelected. But the reality is most people in Washington continue to expect Republicans to take over at least the House next year, which means both of the 2 congressmen who are Democrats would go from being senior Democrats to being minority members of the House, which is similar to being irrelevant. And a lot of powerful legislators over the years have declined to come back rather than becoming a minority member. Right now, I believe the count is up to 28 Democrats have announced they're retiring. We expect more announcements in the next couple months as we approach primary season. So it's mostly political. There's a recognition that they're going to be in the minority next year and they don't want to bother. There may be some other things going on, but there's no scandal. There's no real problem. They're just going to move on and do something else. Steve Welby, my boss, correctly points out that different countries have rolled out the 5G technology in different bands and different ways. So the countries that have already started rolling out the technologies are, you're correct, not exactly analogous to what's going on in the United States. However, those countries did, in fact, successfully evaluate the safety of this technology and allowed it to start being used. The United States is having a harder time doing that, and these conflicts between various users in the electromagnetic spectrum are going to increase, and so we need to get better at this. Robert Burke asks about funding for the national labs. The good news there is that it looks, if Congress does the appropriations bills, in whatever form, there will be more money for the national labs. There could be significantly more money for the national labs. That, in fact, is the most likely outcome at this point. The national labs will get significant increases. Now, I can't tell you exactly what they are because different labs will get different amounts and it gets complicated. But overall funding for the national labs should go up. And that should include money for infrastructure improvements, which includes maintenance, but also new infrastructure construction. IEEE-USA is focusing particularly on that latter part, which sometimes gets overlooked in some of the other discussions. But overall, the national lab budgets look very, very good. The exception to that rule is Defense Department research facilities, which are not seeing significant increases, and as I mentioned a minute ago, could in fact have their budgets cut. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's also not clear that the Defense Department will enjoy the same increases that the civilian agencies will likely see. And my boss is ahead of me on the NSF report. I will be doing that as soon as we get done with this update. And Brendan, I forgot to look up what the House companion for S2992 is. I actually looked it up this morning, but I forgot to write it down. So I will find that out. Altimeter. Thank you, Brendan. I was trying to remember the name of the device. And I think I answered all of the questions. Jonathan, thank you for putting the report link up on the screen for people. If you're interested in seeing the U.S. Science and Engineering report, there's the link for you. Thank Jonathan Cho, as always, for helping put these together. I'm Russ Harrison, Director of Government Relations with IEEE-USA in Washington. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a good end of January, and I look forward to seeing you again on February 3rd. Thank you.
My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE-USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.